the Word of God. When you think back on your life, I think that many of us can remember a time when we let somebody down. There have been times when we have said something to somebody we wanted to take back. There have been times when we promised that we would be there for somebody, and then we were not. There were times when we could have spoken up on behalf of somebody, and yet we stayed quiet. We thought we would be braver in a situation, more calm, dependable, and yet we were not. And in moments like those that probably just lasted for a few minutes, we can carry it for years. We can replay in our heads what we said, what we should have said, why we handled it that way, and how much we regret it. And the deeper question in all of that we ask ourselves is, am I a good person then for have done that? Am I a good spouse? Am I a good friend? And maybe now I'm not as courageous as I thought I was. Maybe now I'm not as worthy or as good or as dependable as I believed I was. And maybe I look like a lesser individual to the person that I hurt. Because when we fail at things, when we replay in our minds the worst moments of our lives as we see it, it changes not only how we feel about what we did, it also changes how we feel about ourselves. And I think that's exactly where Peter finds himself in this moment. See, Peter had done a lot of arrogant talk. Peter had promised Jesus, if everybody else walks away from you, Jesus, I will not. If everybody else around you stumbles, Lord, I won't be the one. In fact, God, Lord, I will go to prison for you. And this was Peter's belief his entire time. And then what happened? Jesus was arrested and being interrogated by the Jewish authorities. And in the midst of that, as he's being interrogated, Peter is standing in the courtyard by a charcoal fire, denying Jesus. And the first time Peter says, no, I don't know that man, Jesus. And the second time, he says, no, you're mistaken, I don't know that man. And the third time, he insisted that he did not know who Jesus is. In Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, after his third time of denying Jesus, Jesus looks at him, and Peter knows that Jesus is acknowledging that he has done exactly what Jesus predicted Peter would do, deny him 3 times. It must have been horrible for Peter, is that before he could apologize, before he could make amends, Jesus is crucified. Peter must have been ashamed. He must have felt like he just failed, like all the good he did as a disciple was for nothing. He had failed Jesus at the very moment when Jesus probably wanted his support. He failed him even though he promised that he never would. And then comes the resurrection. And Jesus is alive. And death did not win. And the worst that could have been done to Jesus has been overcome by Jesus becoming alive again. And that is such good news. The tomb is empty. It answers the question of what happened to Jesus. But another question is still lingering on. A personal question for Peter. Where does this leave me? Oh my goodness. I denied him 3 times. The person that I told I would always be there for, I have denied him. Because as much as he remembers his denying him at in the courtyard, glorious thing that happened in the tomb, the empty tomb, the fact that he came to him in the upper room to see him, the thing that's probably being replayed again and again in Peter's mind is his arrogance and the charcoal fire where he denied Jesus 3 times. The questions, do you know him? Do you know him? No, no, no. And Jesus looking at him after he denied him 3 times. The shame Peter would have carried, especially because the tomb is empty, especially because he has to face Jesus. Failure is like that. We can fail once in our lives. Life can move on. But the part of us that failed is the part that we hold on to. We will always wonder, will that person see me through my worst moment? Will they always remember what I did? Is there still a place for the person that I hurt? Has something changed that can never be changed back? And when it comes to God, we do the same thing. And we wonder, does God see me differently now that I have failed God? The thing about the Gospel of John is that we never know if Peter has a conversation with Jesus. We don't know if Peter goes up to him and goes, Jesus, I denied you like you said I would, and I'm so sorry. That doesn't happen in the Gospels for us. We don't get to know if Jesus and Peter had a one-on-one conversation. We don't know if Peter goes up to Jesus and said, do you understand that I was afraid? We don't hear Peter apologize to Jesus. We don't hear him ask whether he can still be a disciple even though he failed him. We don't know any of that. We know that Jesus has appeared to Peter, but we have not been told what happened next to Peter. And so what does he do? What's the next thing we hear he does? He gets in his boat and he goes fishing. And we don't know why he does that, but we can understand it. We can understand if it's because he wanted to do something familiar. We can understand if he wanted to go back to something he knew and felt good at. Think about what we do when we don't know what to do, when we don't know the answers to something, when we don't know how to handle a situation. We get busy. A lot of us get busy. We go back to work. We go back to answering emails. We clean the house, maybe. We take care of what's directly in front of us. We get busy with something so that we don't have to think about it, so that we distract ourselves, so that we can feel useful. Practical things are easier than unanswered questions. And so Peter, he knows fishing. He's a fisherman. He knows boats. He knows nets. He knows what to do with his hands. What Peter does not know what to do is how to confront his failure. We, as Jesus followers, believe God forgives people. We believe Jesus welcomes sinners. We believe in our minds that no failure is beyond grace. We believe that. We say we believe that. We sing we believe that. But when the failure is really and truly ours, when the failure is something we committed, we do wonder. We wonder, yeah, I know God forgives me, but am I still worthy of God? Does God still want to use me? Does God still see me as faithful? Does God still want something from me? Or should I just stay in the background? Should I just stay quietly in the back row and sing quietly? Should I not offer to do anything anymore because I totally failed at it the last time? Should I not say I am a follower of Christ because I failed to live up to Christ's expectations? Did I lose the opportunity that God gave to me? Has my failure limited my future with God? So we may believe God still loves us, but we are worried that our failure has changed what's possible for us. Peter's real concern may not be, does Jesus forgive me? Because he's walked with Jesus. He's seen Jesus do ministry. Peter's concern on that boat may be, does Jesus still have a place for me? Which is why what happens next matters so much. Peter failed Jesus, yes, when Peter was most certain he would not. Go back to that. He can't go back to that moment in the courtyard and say, yes, I do know Jesus. We can all reimagine how we would act and what we would do differently. But he can't do that, and we can't do that. So the question for Peter really is, does this failure define me? And when morning comes, and Jesus is standing on the shore, and the disciples don't recognize him, and they're failing at catching fish, the thing that they're supposed to be good at, and Jesus directs them to catch fish. And they recognize who he is because the fish come in plentiful. It is with joy that Peter jumps into the water and heads for the shore. And the first thing that Jesus does is not reprimand Peter. The first thing that Jesus does is not say, I told you you were going to say no. The first thing that Jesus does is feed Peter. And after breakfast, Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? And he asks him 3 times. The same amount of times that Peter denies Jesus, Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? There's another connection that I think is so human. Put on the next slide, please, Suchi. Is where this conversation happened. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Smells. Smells can bring back memory. You smell bread, you probably think of your mom or dad or somebody you love baking at home. You can smell the pie. You can smell perfume. When somebody passes, you hold on to their clothes to smell the scent of them. Scent brings back memories. And what I love about this detail that John tells us, that this conversation happened around a charcoal fire, is it is exactly the same smell associated when Peter denied Jesus. Where was Peter when he denied Jesus? Around a charcoal fire. So as he comes to the charcoal fire and Jesus is standing there, he smells the smell, and immediately the memory comes back. The last time I stood around a charcoal fire, the last time that I could see Jesus, I totally failed him. Memory brings back failure for him. And now Peter is standing in front of Jesus with that same smell around, remembering the questions, remembering answer, no, I don't know him. No, I don't know him. No, obviously I don't know him. I think it was very intentional that Jesus did this. I think it was very intentional that Jesus stood with around the charcoal fire, not to shame Peter, not to humiliate him, but so that Peter will know that his worst moment is not his final moment. His worst moment that was happened around a charcoal fire is redeemable by Jesus. That first fire of shame is not his moment. Beside that first charcoal fire, Peter says, no, I don't know him. Besides the second charcoal fire, Peter gets to say, I love you, I love you, I love you. Jesus is allowing Peter to face what happened without feeling trapped. And each time Peter says he loves Jesus, Jesus gives him something to do. Feed my sheep, feed my lambs. Take them when they're young. Look after them. Care for them. Be there for them. Do you love me, Peter? Yes, then tend my sheep. Protect them. Guide them. Nurture them. Do you love me, Peter? Yes, I do. Then feed my sheep. They're now grown up. They're not lambs anymore. Still take care of them. This is an amazing thing. The man who lost his courage, the man whose worst moment was defined by denying Jesus, is given this awesome responsibility by Jesus. He fails Jesus, and he's given responsibility by Jesus. Now, don't get me wrong. Jesus doesn't pretend the failure didn't happen, but he refuses to let it determine what happens next to Peter. Peter may have expected forgiveness and forgiveness only. Peter may have thought, God, he'll forgive me and then he'll tuck me away in the corner. And that's not what's happening. Jesus gives him a calling. Peter maybe could have hoped that he could remain nearby, but Jesus entrusts him to care for people. Jesus forgives Peter his past, and he entrusts Peter with a future. We tend to freeze people in their worst moments. I think of somebody from high school, and I can remember how they try to bully me. And that's how I define them. You tried to bully me when I was in high school. We remember their mistake. The person at work who is a little cruel to us. We repeat this story. 10 years ago, you did this to me. Last week, you hurt me. We decide who they are by one of their worst moments. And we decide that's who they will always be. And sometimes we do that to other people, and many, many times we do it to ourselves. I failed. I'm not good. What worth am I? How could God use me? We replay one conversation. We replay one decision. We replay one season of our lives. We replay one failure over and over again until we make it our entire story. I failed in that moment, so I am a failure. I disappointed someone, so I can't be trusted. I missed my opportunity, so God must be finished with me. But Jesus did not look at Peter that way. And Jesus knew what Peter did. But Jesus also knows that Peter does not have to be who Peter thinks he has to be. He knows Peter can become more faithful. He knows Peter will become more humble and be more patient with weak and frightened people because of his own experience. Jesus gives Peter another opportunity to love. Peter's failure is part of the story, but it's not the end of the story. Your worst moment does not get to be your final word. Some of us have allowed one moment to become the way we see ourselves for the rest of our lives. We know what we did. We know who we disappointed. We know the opportunity we missed. We know the courage we did not have. And maybe we think God sees us that way. And maybe we think God will forgive us, but we don't know if God will trust us. Peter's story tells us Jesus does not see us that way. Peter is held accountable for the denial, but he's not disqualified because of the denial. And for all of us, and for you, and for me, you need to apologize. You may need to make something right. You will have to accept the consequences. You can change your pattern, and you can rebuild trust. But you don't have to spend the rest of your life believing you are the worst of what you did. I love that at the end of this conversation, Jesus says to Peter, follow me. Because those are the same words Jesus used when he first called Peter. When he saw Peter, he said, you, come follow me. And after all Peter's mistakes and his denial and his worst moment, he still looks at Peter and he says, follow me. Peter could have assumed he'd blown his chance and he probably thought he was right in that, but Jesus calls him again. Peter cannot change what he did in the courtyard. We cannot change our mistakes, but we can follow Jesus. Because the Jesus who met Peter on the shore is the Jesus who restores Peter and restores us. Peter's denial was not the final word. The courtyard, the charcoal fire, was not the final word. Peter's shame was not the final word. Who has the final word? Jesus. And his word for you and for me is follow me. Amen.